All right, so now we move on to what may be of greater practical interest to our schools. But I also wanted to, just as I thank the senator, I want to take this opportunity to thank Christina Coughlin, who is the Assistant Commissioner for School Governance at the State Education Department, and also is included in her portfolio are the religious and independent schools across the state. And what can I say? We have no better friend in state government, or probably pretty much anywhere else, than Christina Coughlin, who is always available for us, understands our community, and has been waging a mighty battle internally within the State Education Department to advance the interests of our community wherever possible. And we're just very, very grateful to you, Christina, for all that you have done and will continue to do for our community. And today is no exception. Today, we've heard about the grandiose funding streams that have been created through the federal legislation, but until that gets translated into something that's meaningful to our schools at the ground level, it's a little bit hard to fully celebrate. So Christina, are we almost ready to celebrate? What's the story on this?
Well, first of all, thank you for that very kind introduction. And I gotta say, Senator Schumer is a terrifying act to follow. I'm gonna try to be very calm and not too nervous. But let me tell you where we are. Our Commissioners Advisory Council has been meeting regularly on this because given the size of the task and the timing, to be honest, we like my colleagues in many other states, have been terrified about how to move forward and how to do this, how to implement this program properly, and to get the funds to the schools, or I guess the dollars in the arms, I guess, to use the senator's analogy before. Where we are right now is that application, we put the letter of intent out, and as you know, your schools responded to that. And that was to give us a sense of what the data elements would be so that we could allocate the funds. That helps us if we allocate according to a formula under the state procurement rules, we didn't have to go through a long process. So we went through that so we could make the dollars that each school would have available known as quickly as possible. So we've done that. And now we're having the applications come in. Because our hiring processes tend to be a little slow, what we've done with this is we've asked our colleagues at the Capital Region BOCES, which is led by Anita Murphy, who used to work with the religious and independent schools and keeps them close to her heart. And so she was willing to help us with this project. And our former commissioner, Shannon Tahoe, is actually the counsel her counsel that BOCES, and she's the counsel we're working on the details of the program. So they're starting to receive applications. They sent us an email the other day that the very first school in the state had submitted their application, and Shannon Tahoe emailed me this morning and said that she's received 3 more. So they're coming in. What's going to happen is that once we have all of them together, we're going to get a sense of which schools are just requesting the reimbursement piece of the program. And as you know, there's quite a few purchases that are reimbursable. That's the easy part. The more challenging part is the places where, under the public control of funds requirement, the state needs to have some contract with somebody so that we provide those services. And I think from what I'm hearing from talking to the Commissioners Advisory Council, because other funding streams have supported a lot of the same purchases that the reimbursement part is, we're going to have a lot of schools that are going to want those other pieces: tutoring, summer programming, that kind of thing, and the repairs to the HVAC systems. So once the applications have come in and we can figure out where the priorities are from the schools, we'll then set up vendors. The governor's office was great in terms of giving us some flexibility on the state procurement processes in the enacted budget so that we could work more quickly than we usually do. So, and those instructional pieces, we know that, you know, there are vendors now that are doing work with your schools, and I've reached out, I talked to the CAC again on Monday about this, and they seem to support the idea of working with some of the current vendors. So since they are the ones that are already working with your schools and we have contracts in place, I reached out to the DOE yesterday to get copies of those contracts so that we can piggyback on them and make services available with folks that you're already familiar with. So I'm not sure how we'll do the HVAC repairs yet, but we've talked with a couple of different state agencies for their help. And I think they're still trying to figure out if there's a way that they can be supportive of us in that area. So we're moving through. That's kind of a high level piece. I'm happy to take questions. I'm going to say in advance that I probably won't know the answers, but each question you ask me, we're going to take back and we're going to work through. I have a meeting later this afternoon with the folks at Cap Region, and your questions will get worked into the mix as we're designing the next phase of the program.
Okay, that's great. So the floor is open. I'm going to ask my colleague, Yoshua Pincus, Rabbi Pincus, to serve as the moderator of the Q&A with Christina Coughlin. Yoshua?
Okay, thank you, Christina, for that information. And we are, super appreciative of the maximum flexibility that you are putting into administering these grants, which is certainly in line with the desires of the federal government, as Senator Schumer expressed so eloquently, and especially in light, not every program has this flexibility, so we really appreciate it. And we've gotten a few questions regarding the EANS program that you're referring to, and I will address them. I'm putting it out there to all the attendees. Now's the time. If you have any questions about the EANS program, please put them in the Q&A box, not in the chat, in the Q&A, and we will be addressing them live. Okay, so here is a question. Is there any way to expand the reimbursement to cover increased cleaning and sanitizing expenses for manpower, not just supplies? This is a huge part of the expenses, but we can't apply for them out on application, and so there's a big gap between what we can apply for and what we've actually been allocated to cover these expenses.
There are constraints on what we can do to pay for your own staff. I think that's one of the key pieces of the federal funds tend to have this requirement in it that someone else be providing the service. So there are going to be constraints. I think that there was a response from the federal government that indicated that they would be comfortable with reimbursements for the supplies, but not so much for the staffing. And then in communication with my colleagues, my fellow equitable services ombudsmen across the country, we're all on a listserv and we're all communicating a lot these days in particular. And it seemed like someone had gotten an answer from USDE that an outside contractor could be considered, but that didn't seem like it was final yet. So I think that's one where we'll have to go back to USDE and ask for clarification. But coming up in that context, it's a question they'll be getting from religious and independent schools in a number of different states and from the states themselves.
So you're saying is that while you won't be able to reimburse those manpower expenses, we may be able to have a vendor take care of the cleaning and sanitizing going forward.
Right. I think that's where it's going to end up. I know right now we can do the supplies, but the staff work is not yet approved. Maybe that'll change. And then, and there seem to be a little bit more comfort with an outside vendor providing it. But I think even on that one, USDE needs to nail it down a little bit before I would encourage people to go out and spend a lot of money on that right now.
Okay. Now, we all know that the EANS funding is not available to schools that applied for a second PPP loan. Now, I'm not sure if this question is for you or for somebody in the federal government, but what about a PPP loan? If they got the first round PPP loan after December 27th, are they eligible for EANS?
Oh, I don't know. That's a great question. round after December 27th. Okay. That's when I think we'll ask the USDE about.
Okay.
Some
Okay,
The
next-
statute just says received one after. It doesn't refer to the round, unfortunately. But then you have to know what the intent was of the legislature when they said it. So,
Right, because what happened was that the, as Senator Schumer mentioned, the eligibility rules for PPP were relaxed in terms of the amount of employees. So there were organizations that were not eligible for PPP 1 until that point, and then they applied for it. So whereas I think many people felt that the intention of the legislator was to preclude PPP loans and EANS, but the language may be, as of now, excluding PPP 1 loans as well.
Right.
Okay.
You get a statement of intent on that from someone, and I think that, you know, at the state level, when we have a question, some ambiguity on a bill, sometimes we ask for a statement of intent, like, what did you mean when you approved this bill? And that helps us move forward. Maybe that's what can happen on this question.
Okay, next question. I think you addressed about purchasing HVAC systems. Just want to reiterate that. I think you mentioned that you're working on having HVAC systems maintenance contracts.
Right.
Yeah.
So this is one where prior to January 20th, the suggestion was that this capital work could be done. Since then, it appears that USDE has changed it, and instead of authorizing, full-on installation of new HVAC systems, that the repairs to current ones would be what they would approve. And I don't know that we have a sense of how substantial a repair is still a repair. So that, I know there's, again, that's one where we're waiting on guidance for, because to be honest, we think it'll be a little bit easier to administer if it's bigger projects, because then we can hire different kinds of vendors to do the work. So I'm hoping that when USDE takes a look at this, that they'll have a more expansive definition of what's eligible there.
Okay. This is an interesting question. Can we be reimbursed for student transportation not covered by city and state funds? Students used to travel via mass transit, but COVID makes it risky.
There is some transportation that I can see my colleagues in other states are leaning toward approving. I get the sense that we wouldn't be comfortable, say, buying a new school bus for a school, but it may be that if there was a lease or a temporary arrangement, that might be something that would be acceptable. It appears that that's something that people recognize, was a response to COVID.
I mean, so it might be eligible for reimbursement, but it hasn't been fully clarified yet.
Yes, but I think we're leaning toward yes on that one. So, I would encourage a school that has that and has the receipts for that to submit it. And, if it doesn't work, we would reach back out and say, okay, the decision was no, but I think we're leaning toward yes on this, given the tenor of the conversations with my colleagues around the country. So I think you should go ahead if you have that. Again, probably not buying a bus, but the leases or additional, but having an additional service or a route, something like that, that's something I think we could consider.
Okay, great. On the next question, LOI, there was an option of leasing or purchasing space to accommodate social distancing. On the actual application, it only has the option of leasing. Is purchasing space still eligible for reimbursements?
I don't know. I don't know if that was an error or whether there was a change in the guidance. I'll have to look at that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Is it possible to amend the LOI because of errors that were put in that reduced the amount of allocation?
That's the thing we had talked about at the outset. I know that we've been contacted by a number of schools that realized that they had left out costs or whatever the case may be. That's one where I've reached out to the governor's office to ask how they think we should do. I mean, it has the impact of taking down the allocations of other schools if we increase, so that it would be moving every change we make for one school affects the rest of them. So I think the governor's office is going to lean toward pointing schools to round 2. And we actually internally had a conversation yesterday touching on this issue, but saying that when we do round 2 and we get the question about that, you were wise enough to ask Senator Schumer about, like, will the model be this, will the formulas be the same in the next round? As soon as we know that, and we know what our formula is going to be, we're going to get the letter of intent for the second round posted so that schools have a little bit more time, hopefully, to fill these out and we don't have the same chances for error. So to answer your question directly, Rabbi Pincus, I'm thinking it's going to be no, but that's one where we're going to consult with the governor's office.
Okay, great, thank you.
Disappoint the other 649 schools that, right, and say, oh, your allocation's lower. So that's the trade-off we have here.
We had a couple questions regarding the deadline for future purchases to be reimbursed, meaning that the application is due April 30th, but how much after that can they be reimbursed for purchases?
So what we did was we asked, we're going to put up another form for a school, let's say something, a PPE, personal protective equipment. A school knows that it's going to take a large shipment of that in June. So they can tell us that in the application that would be a future purchase, and that's an approvable expense, obviously. So we're going to put up another form so that once they we'll know that a portion of their allocation is going to be dedicated to that. And then once they have made the purchase of that PPE in June, they'll submit another form and we'll do it. And we'll authorize the reimbursement. We've given until July 15th for that because of the deadlines in the federal program are, I want to say it's August 23rd. So we've given until July 15th to get that done so that we have time to process any remaining reimbursements and get schools paid prior to that August deadline.
Okay, great, thank you.
So you'll see that on the EANS website. We'll send out, once we have that form available, we'll send out a note to the listserv and schools will in their application identify themselves as ones that plan to come in for additional reimbursement. So we'll know who it is. So we'll spread the word.
Right. Another question. We've had to do numerous educational extracurricular programs outdoors. There's those programs have an expense including rental space, professional audio, video, equipment and production, remote speakers, live streaming, and to what extent can those be reimbursed?
That's the first time I've heard that one. I think the rental space one we know is eligible. The equipment I think would be part of the cost of delivering it. So I would be inclined to think that that's something we could approve. So I would advise the school to submit that.
Right, so the equipment, streaming costs, things like that. Okay.
Yeah.
I think this was addressed already about if we could claim the busing expenses were not reimbursed for the end of last year. So I think we discussed that and we said that is something.
So, right. I mean, if schools were closed by the governor at the end of last year, I don't think that we're going to be in a position to reimburse for those expenses. That's a different situation. But I was thinking when I said we were inclined to approve it, where if a school has one route that they now are running 2 buses along where they used to run one, that the cost of that additional driving and so on would be eligible. The social distancing component, not the busing during school closures.
Okay. Can we get reimbursed for an independent contractor that was hired for construction of new space, setting up the barriers, any other space constructed to accommodate social distancing?
I'm a little nervous about that one because that's getting close to the capital expenditure that the U.S. Department of Education has put limits on. So I'm not entirely sure about that one. I'll be happy to ask, but I would expect that the answer to that one would be no.
Right. Okay. What kind of documentation needs to be sent in with the application for future purchases? So I think that you mentioned there'll be a form that will be posted for that.
So we modeled both the current the reimbursement for past expenditures and this the part for future reimbursement right along the kinds of documentation that you submit for the non-public safety equipment grant. And so, in fact, when we sent a copy of our internal review protocol to the BOCES for safety equipment and PSE to the BOCES yesterday, so that they would start to know what we were going to be looking for them to do. So, you know, it would be proof that you've made the purchase. So canceled check, you know, that kind of an invoice and a canceled check, just like you would submit to NPSE.
Right. Just a couple more if you have another few minutes. Okay.
A couple minutes, sure.
Okay, just a few more questions. If we have an ongoing expense, for example, leasing a building to accommodate social distancing, it's an ongoing expense as opposed to a one-time purchase. So can that be reimbursed?
I think the federal guidance is going to come down on yes for that, but it might be a little complicated. So I would advise that the school submit that and then have a backup plan.
Okay. And then I think this was addressed already, that if a school received the second round of PPP and therefore source advised them to withdraw their EANS application, if the EANS eligibility rule is changed, as Senator Schumer mentioned, will they be able to resubmit the application?
If the rules change, we'll be happy to accept them.
Okay, great.
And I think I think Senator Schumer is probably going to find it easier to influence the third round of stimulus funds, the EANS 2. So hopefully we'll get direction on that so that a school that accepted, you know, the PPP money on, say, January 15th will be able to take advantage of the EANS 2. I don't anticipate that they will say for EANS 1, the one we're currently implementing, that will be a ruling that would change.
Okay. So I'm not sure if I understand this question. Maybe you'll understand better than me. Our schools are part of a large organization which received the first round of PPP, which may have been used for our payroll. So those funds were not used to offset any direct COVID costs. Being that we applied for the EANS with our bids and not our organization's 501c3, can we be eligible for EANS funds?
We told another institution of a different sort than a large yeshiva that the answer to that question was no. The PP that if the organization accepted the PPP after the December 27th date that's mentioned in the statute, that we didn't think we could authorize that.
Okay, and then this is, as now the final question, is there a list of acceptable expenses for the EANS?
Well, our application has a list that's taken from the statute. And then we have an other category there, which, you know, as you've done here, you've asked me some questions of things, and I sort of, you know, often don't know the answer is yes or no, but there were a couple when I said, I think the answer is going to be yes. I would ask, and I would say your schools who are all listening to this webinar should be aware that Aguda over time has been very effective in calling me up and asking me to make things eligible in our various programs. So to the extent that, you know, something else comes up and it's aligned, then, you know, we will try to get to yes. And, you know, if it seems like it's a hard one, you know, we may have to consult the U.S. Department of Education. But I've certainly, you know, if it's aligned with the intent of the statute, and that language that you see in the application is was pulled from the U.S. Department of Education's sample application, which was pulled from the statute. So most of what's eligible is there at the category level. And then you may want to ask us, does this fit into that category? We'll try to say yes.
Okay. Okay. The Yeah, I think the last question is, it's not something, it's regarding the second round, the EANS 2, so that's, remains to be seen.
Can I have the question anyway, even if it's just so as everyone knows this is referring to the second round? It might help me as I'm thinking about what we're going to do for that second round.
Right, and I think this was something which was addressed with Senator Schumer, that if we end up taking the second round of PPP and still can't receive EANS, could we take the EANS 2?
I think we'll all hope that Senator Schumer is able to influence that that guidance in a way that we can get to yes on that. That is well above my level. It's going to be a federal decision. But it's a great question. We have the same question. Other schools asked yesterday. I'm not surprised that it's of keen interest to your community as well.
Yeah. Is there anything else here? Yeah, I think that's it. We thank you very much for your time. Thank you to all of our panelists, and we really appreciate all of your work on our behalf. I want to just thank all of our attendees for taking time out of your busy day to attend this important webinar. If there are any questions that were not addressed because they were not regarding EANS, we will endeavor to answer those by email, assuming that we know who sent them and it's not an anonymous attendee. And as always, please feel free to reach out to yeshivaservices@aguda.org with any of your questions, and we will continue to answer those and provide guidance as soon as it is released by the federal, state, and local governments. Thank you, everybody, for your time.
If I may, one closing thing, we have our program website is EANS at NYSED.gov. We will endeavor to answer your questions if they come to us.
No, I'm going to post that in the chat.
Great.
So can you just say that one more time so I can post it to everybody?
The program website is EANS at NYSED. Program email box, pardon me, EANS at NYSED.gov. So, you know, Aguda calls me quite often and asks questions or sends me a batch email of questions. If that works for you, that works for me too. It's been working for years, but we do have that program email address too. So if you wanted to ask us.
And the website that has all the information on it and the application?
It is, I don't know the website, but if you go to the NYSED website and you search EANS, EANS, we do have a program website where we're loading all the files as they become available.
Yeah, I got it. I'm going to post them.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Christina, thank you. As always.
Happy to be here. Thank you very much.
Okay. And thanks to everybody for attending. Yeshua, we're gonna close up shop, right?
Yes.
Okay. All the best. Yes, Thank you.